Good morning, good afternoon, I should say. I always do that because it's been morning all day and now it's just now afternoon. Welcome to Capitol Clarity. This is week 10 of the 2024 legislative session. Can you believe we are almost at the end of the session? It feels like it just started a few days ago, but time is flying, things are happening, and well, there are a lot of things happening that we need to be watching out for. My name is Brian. I'm here on behalf of Idaho Freedom Foundation. They've been involved here in Capitol Clarity since the beginning. It was started by then Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan and then Representative Dorothy Moon as a way of bringing people and the political process into the same room. When it comes to politics, there's a lot of issues that are discussed. Taxes, regulations. This morning in Senate State Affairs, they were deciding whether or not public funds should be used for gender transitions. We're starting to get into some really, I think, weird territory as far as politics goes. And so more than ever, we need to focus on the most important principles. And one of those principles is your bodily autonomy. Does the government have a right to tell you what you can or can't do to yourself? Does the government have the right to tell you that you must take an injection in order to participate in public life? Do they have a right to tell you that you must submit to extensive surveillance and monitoring, carry around a card with your health history and maybe even your political positions to determine if you're allowed to take part in society? Those things sound like something out of 1984 or Brave New World, and it might be tempting to just say, that's not what we have to worry about in America. We're still a free country. Well, those things are happening. Those things are encroaching. Those things are percolating in the minds of political figures and bureaucrats throughout our country. So today we actually have two guests, one in person, one via Zoom, and they will be talking about these things, how they've fought against our threats to bodily autonomy and health freedom, and what we can do in Idaho to continue to hold the line. So first, to introduce our second guest, I would like to introduce our first, and that is Leslie Manookian of Health Freedom Defense Fund. a lot of health freedoms in there, but let's hear from Leslie first.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to introduce Greg, and then I'm going to speak about what Health Freedom Defense Fund does. Many of you probably know about what we do. And then I'm going to speak after Greg. So let me just say, Greg Glaser is an attorney and a friend. I've known him for probably close to 15 years now. He's been fighting for health freedom for a long time. He's an attorney for Children's Health Defense, but he's also been an attorney for other organizations in the health freedom space. He has, he's pursuing a variety of different litigation against government overreach in defense of our health freedoms. He is a constitutionalist. He's a healthy living advocate. He's just an all-around fantastic person who has done a deep dive on the surveillance state. And Greg and I, for the last several years, through the whole COVID era, have been on a weekly call with a variety of activists, advocates, attorneys, doctors, and scientists from around the world, discussing what's going on and what we can do about it. And Greg, in the last few years, has done a very deep dive on the surveillance state. And he made a presentation to our group probably a month and a half ago that I saw, and I just said, we have got to get him to present at Capitol Clarity, because it's imperative that the legislators know about this issue, that Idahoans know about this issue, and then we decide how we're going to address it. You are going to be shocked by some of the things that he has to say and to share, because the technology is way further along than you can ever imagine, and they're already implementing it in places like Los Angeles. So I know you will be as rapt as I was when I saw Greg present on this. And without any further ado, Greg, let me hand it over to you. Welcome to Capitol Clarity and to presenting in Idaho. We're so grateful to have you.
I'm really glad to connect with you guys. Hold on. Sure. How's that?
Brian, the screen's not on. healthiest people on the planet, according to our data. And so that brought me to the health freedom issue. I've been a lawyer for over 20 years. I'm very science-oriented, and today I'm going to be talking about surveillance technology and the law. This is a computer from approximately 1984. When this computer was launched by Macintosh, the price of it was $666. And they were giving them away for free if you wanted to take one home and try it out. That's how much they wanted one of these devices in your home. Of course, today, they're in everyone's home. Everyone has an Apple or a smartphone in their hand or in their house with smart devices. They have now become ubiquitous and everywhere. As Leslie mentioned during the introduction, I'm one of the lawyers for Children's Health Defense. We protect the rights of children, including privacy rights, and protecting them from environmental dangers. One of the cases that we focus on in particular is protecting children and families from smart meters. This is a very important case that I'm highlighting for you on the screen. It's something I've discussed about on Children's Health Defense TV. The government is not allowed to check on your smart meter more than every 15 minutes. Because if they check on your smart meter more than every 15 minutes, they can get a pretty good sense of what's happening in your home. And so this is how the Fourth Amendment works, or at least it's supposed to. We need good lawyers and courts to stop surveillance in your home as these advanced smart devices increase. Companies like Oracle and IBM are very advanced in the way that they can monitor smart devices in your home. You may or may not know this, but you should know it. Your Wi-Fi can see you. The Wi-Fi in your house works like a dolphin sonar. It sends out a signal, and then that signal will bounce. And the way that it bounces and ricochets affects that the Wi-Fi on the back end, artificial intelligence, can read what's happening in your house. This is the civilian version of the technology from 2023. And this shows the trend in which things are going. You have invited into your home many devices, including Wi-Fi and smart appliances, that can now spy on you. And the thing is, you're never going to know what spying is happening behind the scenes because the data is managed on servers off-site. So probably you want to know what some of your rights are. Well, you have the right to be informed, and you have the right to opt out of surveillance. And you also have rights at the government level, but with regard to the government keeping your information, such as you have the right to require agencies show you records that they keep on you. You can require them to follow what are called fair information practices, which is where they're only allowed to have information that they need to know. You can place restrictions on how they share that information. But every state in the union, including also the federal government, every state has gaps in their privacy laws because that's how the privacy law system is built. It was built by industry. And we are currently living in that world that industry wanted, which includes a tremendous amount of surveillance. The direction in which this is going is toward digital ID. It's quite obvious. In Idaho, I really like the state acronym that you guys have, ID. I think that traditional ID is a good thing, but biometric ID is a very dangerous thing. And the people in power are clearly moving in the direction of biometric ID, including in the direction of what India just did. They gave biometric ID, which is face scan, have your address, your name, your date of birth, basically all your profile information connected with your biometrics, including your thumbprints. They put all this into a database for 1.3 billion Indians. And of course, it got hacked quickly, and the information ended up on the dark web for as little as $80,000. And this was the largest hack in history, and it just happened. So where is this going? What happens next? As I mentioned, I'm the chief litigator for this case in Los Angeles called Smart City Case. A smart city is a 15-minute city. It's where you can get everything that you need within 15 minutes of your house. That's how they pitch it. What it really is it's a surveillance city. This means things like vaccine passports, social credit scores, coming to a progressive city near you. My understanding is that Boise is the progressive city in Idaho. And Los Angeles claims to be the most advanced smart city in the nation. They're planning to showcase their tech at the Olympic Games in 2028. And we, through Children's Health Defense, we are suing the city over their smart city records. That means emails, accounting records, contracts. We want to know everything about how they're collecting data, how they're selling the data to third parties such as Amazon and Oracle. And the city is avoiding producing millions of records. And so we are in court to gain access to those records. This is part of our we have a three-part plan to protect privacy. First is exposing this constant surveillance in the city. Second is protecting children's opt-out rights. And third is protecting opt-in rights. And I would certainly welcome during the Q&A if you guys have questions for me about opt-out and opt-in rights. Now probably, I mentioned Boise, but probably what you're thinking is, well, this surveillance, it's just in Los Angeles, right? It's not really going to come to my town in Idaho. But I would like to remind you about my first slide. I'm going to just jump back to it really quick. Do you remember when this computer was just something that was out there? It wasn't in your home? Well, eventually it did come into your home. And it's the same thing with these surveillance cities, these smart cities. And so you probably want to know what is involved with these smart cities. Well, the city of Los Angeles, they published their plan for total smart city surveillance, for basically total surveillance by the year 2028. And they do so with partners such as Amazon, which has contracts with the CIA for real-time monitoring of your electricity, your water, Wi-Fi, etc. And LA is on track to become the first 5G city in the nation. They have 2,670 5G devices attached to city streetlights. I'll mention why that's really important in a bit, but it's essentially part of the Internet of Things. The idea that all of these devices are connected and communicating with one another. And the data is being maintained on private servers by private companies, such as Amazon. This is one of the documents that we uncovered in our litigation. What it is this is the city's top contractor. They're called Gartner. So that would be like Boeing is to the United States Department of Defense. That's like Gartner is to the city of LA. They're the top contractor. And so LA's top contractor is saying that it would be a good idea to monitor people 24/7 in their own homes with facial surveillance. So that, for example, if you look dehydrated, they can send a text message to check on it. That's how out of touch these people are. They think it's a good idea to monitor people's faces 24/7 in their home. And of course, it's dystopian. Now, the reason why that's such a problem is because a lot of the things that we think are good in life, natural healing, good parenting, the government thinks are not. The government has very different views than most Americans. So now I'd like to go back to the city's public-facing message here. Essentially what's happening is the city's being turned into a giant data farm. And again, this is coming to small towns as well. And I can explain how that is. But first I want to make a note about children's health. I am a lawyer for Children's Health Defense, and I'd like to make a special point about it. Social media and other tech services, they've been linked to depression, anxiety, isolation, suicide, even Meta, that's Facebook, even their own studies found that their products are toxic to young users, particularly teenage girls. Smartphones are highly addictive. If you monitor the brain, this is a University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine study. They found that social media apps have the same kind of effects as playing a slot machine. Another study in 2023, University of North Carolina, they found that social media is rewiring the brains of children as young as 12 years old. Think about that with me, folks. When you got a smartphone, were you thinking you were rewiring your brain? Probably not, but that's what the studies are showing. And so this is very serious tech. It's something we need to take very seriously. We need to take action on. So to sustain the city's massive data farm, they plan on tripling the size of the street lighting department in the coming years. Why is street lighting so important? Probably, if you're like me, you grew up in a little town or a cul-de-sac playing baseball in the cul-de-sac. And streetlights, when the streetlight came on, it was time for dinner, right? Dinner! That's what a streetlight is. But the world you grew up in does not exist. The new streetlights look like this. This is what they're putting up all over LA. They don't just light streets. They're not in the street, and they're not lights. They're cameras and listening devices that have a radius that go into private buildings, into your office, into your home. They watch and they listen to everything. And so, for example, the city of Los Angeles has over 200,000 streetlights. 37,000 of them are these smart poles, cameras, listening devices. And the smart poles, they're like data gatherers. They collect the data, and then it's analyzed by artificial intelligence. Well, think about it. Back in the 1980s, when I was playing baseball, if they collected information on me and my brothers on the cul-de-sac, they couldn't use it. There's no way to process all that information. But today, we live in the artificial intelligence arena where information can be processed instantly, and massive information can be processed instantly. And so the game has changed, and tech is the biggest game in town. And we caught the city of Los Angeles admitting in their documents that they plan to monetize this information, meaning they're selling it to third parties who do not have your best interests in mind, such as Google. LA is known for Hollywood, and the city wants to showcase its technology on the world stage. Here's a document we uncovered where the city is saying that they are going to prevent future crime with their technology. Now, the image on the left is from a public record that we uncovered. The image on the right, I added that. That's obviously from a movie. And I'm highlighting this because it's Los Angeles, which is where Hollywood is located. And much of this feels like that. It feels very futuristic. I will close with a joke, which is that I'm only halfway done with the presentation. So thank you guys for bearing with me. There is sort of a joke here, though, and this is the city's digital code of ethics. The city is violating their own code of ethics. This is an excellent document. It says that you have the right to privacy. The city's not going to surveil you or sell your data. Of course, the city is doing all of those things. They're completely violating their own code of ethics. It's almost as if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Now, we uncovered this document in our litigation. It's not a public record. This is, and it's not fun. This is deadly serious. 24/7 surveillance. It means that our American way of life is over if we don't fix this. And states like Idaho can fix it because states like Idaho are attracting the right kind of people, the right kind of way of living. And I hope that during Q&A you guys can talk about that, ask me questions about that. I think it's very important. The things we think are good and healthy, natural remedies, truth, the government tends to think are dangerous and endangering each other. Not necessarily in Idaho. There's good legislators in Idaho. Good people in Idaho. We can fix this in Idaho. I'd like to discuss with you now quantum computers. It's very important. It's a very important subject that when you guys understand the implications of quantum computers, you'll better appreciate this, how advanced things are, the stakes. They're not just an upgrade from classical computers. 2019, Google's quantum computer called Sycamore, it solved in a matter of seconds a problem that takes a regular computer, even a supercomputer, 10,000 years to solve, which meant that previously something was impossible, but today it's possible. Not only possible, but happens in seconds. And this is a New York Times article that I'm featuring on the screen, which means that this is mainstream civilian information. And they're saying that all secrets, national security secrets, your bank account, etc., are all hacked within 5 to 10 years. Well, the reality is that they're already hacked by quantum computers. And the people in power, they take this very seriously. So there's going to be a transition toward new security systems coming in the next 4 years. So you have to pay attention to what I'm saying. It is coming upon you. Just like the computer came upon you, whether you wanted it or not, it's the same with this information. Again, quantum computers are just different. And what they do is they process data in a different way. And if data is the new gold, then quantum computers are the new kings. Because kings can store, they can create, steal, and destroy at will. Same with quantum computers. They can store data, create data, they can steal it, they can destroy it at will. So sovereign nations will do anything they can to control quantum computing. This is what a quantum computer looks like. It's going to change everything. chemistry and materials science. They're going to be inventing new materials, new drugs. Practical optimization problems like supply chains are going to be completely overhauled and optimized with quantum computers. The finance sector is going to be completely computing based in the future. All cryptography is changing. So they're going to move from traditional encryption to quantum encryption. What does that mean for you? Well, do you own Bitcoin? It's already hacked. Your 256-bit key is already hacked. All it takes for a quantum computer is about 10 minutes. That's all it needs. And even if you doubled the size of that bit, it wouldn't change. It doesn't change the fact that these quantum computers can be so fast. And so all of cryptography is changing. Now, the computer you're looking at on this big screen here, I don't know which screen you guys are looking at, but the computer you're looking at on the big screen, you're not going to own one of these. This is a quantum computer that's for very powerful institutions, organizations, military contractors, and so forth. You don't get one of these. What you get is the surveillance phone. You get the little smartphone. You get Wi-Fi. You get things that spy on you. You get a dishwasher that has a radio frequency that communicates with a server. That's what you get. You don't get the quantum computers. This is game-changing technology, and the leading providers in this industry are Elon Musk with his xAI, Microsoft with OpenAI, Google's DeepMind. That's who's running things. This is the official story about how quantum computers came to be and where we are. I don't think this is accurate, but this is the official story. And next I want to play a little, well, actually first, quantum computers, they're also somewhat in their infancy because they require cold chain storage. So a lot of the information that I'm discussing is not necessarily applicable to today. It's really more of information for tomorrow. And these classical machine learning models, they're based on adjusting parameters, weights, and biases. And so they require an entirely new way of programming. So our smartest guys cannot program these computers. The computers have to program themselves. They're that advanced. And so AI is taking over. This is completely changing the way that we interact with computers. And so this is what's at stake. I'm going to play a clip here. It's a little video clip, and it's 30 seconds long.
Only thing God managed to create powerful organic beings. All these trees and giraffes and humans, they're little run. But we are now trying to create inorganic entities, inorganic platforms, cyborgs, artificial intelligence, and so forth. If we succeed, and there is a very good chance we will, then very soon we will be beyond the God of the Bible.
Well, you just heard from the top advisor to Klaus Schwab at the WEF. That is a very leading thinker at the United Nations who says, in his words, quote, if we succeed, and there's a very good chance we will be beyond the God of the Bible. That man is saying that he wants to merge with technology. He is admitting it. And that is what's at stake. So it's very important to understand where this is going. You have to see beyond the curve. To really be a critical thinker, you have to understand that this is chess and you have to see beyond the curve. For example, when COVID was announced in, am I coming through okay? Can you guys hear me? Or did my screen stop? I suppose I'll just continue. So beyond the curve, in March of 2020, we didn't just see COVID. We saw the vaccine, right? In April of 2020, when they were sticking swabs up everyone's nose for PCR tests, we didn't just see the PCR tests. We knew this was covert genetic surveillance. So it's the same thing with technology today. You can see where this is going. It's going toward biometric ID. It's going toward the removal of sovereignty, the removal of local sovereignty. And that's what AI and quantum computing is really all about. And as I researched this, what I learned is that governments are not at the top of the food chain. It's actually these private companies, Microsoft, Oracle, Accenture, because they create and own the technology, and they manage the data at the top. And the job of the governments is mostly mid-level operations to issue IDs and so forth, like NIST. That's a government institution under the Department of Commerce. They're completely industry captured. They're going to issue the rules for digital ID, but the technology is owned by companies like Accenture. They set the rules, they have the data. So the people who control Klaus Schwab, WWF, and so forth, they do plan to be gods. That's what's at stake. And so they're trying to neutralize people. They're trying to neutralize people in Idaho in this coming surveillance state with biometric ID. Because once they get biometric ID, they can fully rig elections and they can remove your police power, your local power. They will use things like DPI, digital public infrastructure, to manage your governance in Idaho. And that is what's at stake. And so things like wars and resource deficiencies, all of these things serve the ultimate plan of technological takeover. And that's what these people want. These people in power, they want war, they want terror, they want our southern border invaded so that they can justify biometric ID, because that's what's considered best practices. If you need to deport people from a nation, well, you need to identify them. And best practices is biometric ID. That's what's at stake. And so it takes forward thinkers to understand how to think outside that box, outside that Hegelian dialectic. Transhumanism is most certainly the end game. You can see it in the academic papers, but fortunately, biometric ID is its Achilles heel. How do I know this? From reading patents. All of the things today that you use to interact with society essentially require your ID. For example, you want to use your bank account. Well, that requires ID. You want to buy property, ID. Your rights, your citizenship status, your affiliation, your standing in court, accounts, privileges, services, land title, and more. All of it is connected to ID. And I can read from the patents that they're building in biometric ID into these future technologies. And so it's kind of like a remote control. If you take out the batteries, the remote control doesn't do anything. It has many buttons, but doesn't do anything. It's the same with biometric ID. Take out the biometric ID, the future technology doesn't work. That's why it's Achilles heel. Our predecessors warned us about this. They thought RFID chips would be the way that society is tracked and so forth, but I'm going to tell you it's biometric ID. And the more that society is impoverished, the more it's likely that it will be tattoo-based technology. You might think, oh, tattoos, that doesn't sound right, but this just won the Nobel Prize in December 2023. So just a few months ago, it won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, nanodots. So Bill Gates was just at Davos saying the next vaccine is going to be a tattoo. It's going to be it's like a tiny little, it's like a Band-Aid. You just apply it, and then the tattoo has nanodots that can organize anywhere in your body. That's considered best practices. That's future technology. So it's here, and what we need forward thinkers who are really willing to step out of the box and understand what's at stake. And I highly recommend that folks also discuss these matters in free speech forums. Free speech is very important today. Here's a forum that I highly recommend called GAP. So I want to thank you guys for listening to this presentation. And I'll turn it over now to Leslie. If there are any questions, I'll be able to answer them during the Q&A.
Question is, and after I ask, wait a half second so I can switch the audio again. How do you opt out of this surveillance state digital future?
Well, that's exactly the question that I was hoping to receive, because what we really need are good laws to opt out and opt in. And I'll explain why opt-in laws are even better than opt-out. Now, you have to understand, folks, that The privacy law system in the United States, including in Idaho, was built by industry. So you already have the right to opt out of surveillance. But look at your life. Look at how many people have your data. Look at how many companies have your data, your private information. Perhaps even you took a blood test and that blood test went to a laboratory somewhere. You don't really know where your information is. That was the system that was built. It was really built in the 1970s and onward. And it was built to allow the collection of information by industry. So if we really want to opt out of future collection of biometric information, what we need a fresh start. And I know that everybody wants this. They want a fresh start with their data. You know, maybe they took a blood test in the past. Maybe they signed up for an account in the past. Maybe just maybe, you uploaded a ton of your personal information to Facebook. And you don't want Facebook using your information to make artificial intelligence videos of you and selling those videos to third parties, right? None of us want that. But the technology is available to do that. So how do we, as people, opt out of that kind of biometric information sharing and use? And the answer is opt-in laws. There's a state, Illinois, that has a pretty good biometric opt-in law, and it's called BIPA, Biometric Information Practices Act. And what they did is they made a law that says that you have to give informed consent before anyone is allowed to collect your biometric information, such as your face scan. And there was a woman who worked at White Castle, which is a hamburger establishment, and she sued this hamburger establishment, which was her employer, because they were scanning her face every day before work. And she was able to collect $1,000 a day because they didn't provide her informed consent. So that's an example of a state law which is quite favorable for citizens, which can be implemented in freedom-loving states such as Idaho, opt-in. And I've prepared a proposed law that I would be most happy to share with legislators in Idaho so that Idaho can protect its families and also advance good industry practices.
What legislators have taken this on, or have any?
In Idaho,
Yeah.
no one. This is the first time I think most of them are hearing about it, and that's why I wanted so much to have Greg present here.
How many are in the room?
Some of them have a few have just left, I'll tell you that.
Okay. They need to get on board.
Don't worry, this is the first. This is just the first step, is introducing this, making sure that Idahoans are aware of it and our legislatures, so that we can actually start working on legislation.
The question was what legislators here in Idaho started on this, and Leslie was explaining that this is the introduction of this issue, and hopefully some people will pick it up.
Go ahead, sir. There's another question here, Ryan.
So in London, the crazy people.
That it does get picked up for the reason that Illinois already has multiple class action lawsuits on behalf of citizens, and Illinois is benefiting greatly. And Idaho is being left behind because what we need good conservative legislators to pass a family-friendly opt-in that will protect the data of Idahoans. And so that Idahoans can sue companies like Google and Microsoft for holding their data without consent and using their data without consent. And that would be a game changer. It would certainly improve life in Idaho. I think it would attract a lot of freedom-loving, constitutional-loving people to Idaho. And it would make Idaho a leader in this area of protecting privacy rights. And that's how things are supposed to work with state competition. You know, you have different states that pass different laws. California is obviously going the way of promoting industry, but I would love to see Idaho protecting families first.
So here's a question. How do we resist when they hold things over our heads? Say, you have to give up your rights if you want to fly. You have to give up your rights if you want to travel. You have to give up your rights if you want to participate in various aspects of society. How do you resist that when they start closing off society to us unless we give up our rights?
Well, there is a very good option, which is to have a law that says you cannot be discriminated against in your commerce, your education, and so forth for being in a natural state. That means that if you want to use your traditional ID, if you want to be unvaccinated, if you want to travel without a mask and so forth, you cannot be discriminated against for existing in your natural state. And those kind of laws, I think, can begin to gain traction in this decade, because for the first time, people have seen the draconian COVID lockdowns and discrimination. They saw it from government and they saw it from business. So for the first time, there's a reason for legislators to step in and protect the right of families, the rights of individuals to navigate society in their God-given state.
Can you comment on the technology that was put into the COVID shots? I believe a whistleblower coming out talking about the nanotechnology. Would you talk about that? Thank you.
You can ask Brian.
We're about 15 minutes. The question was about any possible nanotechnology in the recent injections. If you have any thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. There are several researchers who have looked at that issue, comparing and by researchers I mean microscopy scientists, who have looked at the COVID shots under dark field microscopy and then compared it to what they see in published papers about nanotechnology. And there are most definitely some similarities between the two images. But in order to confirm that information, it requires materials science tools that are often available just at universities and in very high-level labs. So I think it's an emerging issue of whether there was nanotechnology that was not disclosed in the vaccines, but and there's two categories in which this information is coming out. One is the nanotech, and the other is just genetic impact. For example, there's going to be a paper coming out just next month from a doctor, Dr. Stoller, on this particular issue of do the vaccines change a person's genetics. And so I think we'll learn more in the years ahead. But for now, I think we've learned enough to know that these pharmaceutical companies cannot be trusted with a direct line to our tissues and our bloodstream. Rather, we need good laws that protect against the ability of anyone to inject something in you subcutaneously without your consent. An example of this would be California Civil Code section 52.7, which says that no person in the state of California can be coerced to accept a subcutaneous injection of a tracking device. I don't know why the California legislature enacted that law many years ago, but I think it's an example that shows that even in a state like California, legislators can step up and they can say, we see what we think could happen in the future, and we want to prevent that. And that's actually one of the most important lessons from COVID, is that if we don't have the protections in place before COVID happens, then when COVID happens, we lose a lot of our rights. And this is not a new thing. I remember reading 20 years ago, I was reading a book by Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist. He was the Chief Justice. And he was saying that when he reviewed history during emergencies, he found that many times judges were very deferential to the government during the emergency. But then after the emergency was over, several years after, then the courts started to rule in favor of individual and constitutional rights. And so Justice Rehnquist was saying, you know, we really need more proactive judges. So during the emergency, we can gain favorable rulings. And Leslie Manookian's group, Health Freedom Defense Fund, is a great example of a group that proactively got a court order that allowed people to travel by airline without wearing a mask. And they shut down a CDC rule on that. And so there are good judges out there, and I think we'll see change because of COVID.
Thank you, Greg, for that presentation and for sharing of your time here. I think that you've given people here a lot to think about, especially the legislators in the room. And hopefully some of them will be reaching out to you in the future to get more information and collaborate on something. It's too late this year, but the next session's only 9 months away.
Dispense with more formalities.
Yeah, thank you.
That's so much to think about, isn't it? You can see why I was so compelled to have to talk to Ron and others at the Freedom Foundation and have Greg be part of Capital Clarity, because it's such a critical issue. And it's actually tied in with our health freedom. So I'm Leslie Manookian. I started a nonprofit called Health Freedom Defense Fund. And as Greg just mentioned, we are the group that's responsible for defeating the CDC's federal travel mask mandate. So you don't have to wear a mask on a plane, train, bus, or anything else because of us. You can't imagine the joy on April 18th of 2022 when we got their ruling. We were literally jumping up and down with excitement. Mostly because, as some of my friends who are leaders as well in the health freedom movement have said to me, because it actually gave people hope. It was the first point at which people started to feel like, oh my gosh, the tide is turning. And we're not helpless. We're not powerless. And I think that that's why it was, first of all, it was a huge blow to the administrative state, which I want to address real quickly. But it was also something that gave people a sense that, you know what, we're not just going to go over the edge right now, because I think a lot of us were in that place. So Health Freedom Defense Fund, I only founded it in the middle of 2020. As soon as 2020 unfolded, I knew what was happening, which is that they were going to use all sorts of legislation that had been put in place for the last 20 years in order to use a public health scare as a pretext for installing a more dictatorial approach to something than was necessary or lawful. So I started planning that I was going to start a nonprofit and set it up, and we hit the ground running already in the spring of 2021, shortly after they started mandating the shots, and we sued the Los Angeles Unified School District. We have twice stopped the Los Angeles Unified School District's vaccine mandate for their employees. The second case is still working its way through the courts. This case has the potential to change the country, because never before have the courts recognized that natural immunity is something valid and real. And that's something that we've argued. Natural immunity must be recognized. We also argued that the shots are not a preventative of any kind. They are therapeutic at best. Some might argue that they're just flat out dangerous, but the point is that they are not they're not a true vaccine in the way that the law used to justify mandates foresaw. That's Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a lawsuit from 1905, which said that in extreme situations like smallpox, the government has a vested interest in mandating a vaccine known to be safe and effective. COVID is not smallpox. The shots were not safe or effective. They were not known to be safe or effective. In fact, we knew already that more people died on the trials than died on the shot than on the placebos, and yet they were still approved by FDA. So this is the kind of work that we're doing. So we've sued the Los Angeles Unified School District. That's a huge case. We've sued the Biden administration 3 times. We have not lost yet. Our 2 other cases didn't ultimately get to ultimate adjudication because they were dismissed once the Biden administration rescinded the emergency last spring. And our mask case, as you know, that struck a huge blow to the administrative state. We also educate people about their rights because we think it's so important that people understand what their rights are so they can stand up for them. If you don't know, how can you stand up? And let's be honest, most people, especially younger Americans, have 0 clue about what their rights are. They're not taught civics. They don't even know. Most young people don't even understand what the Bill of Rights is or our Constitution. They don't know why we have these things, and they actually don't support them, a lot of these young people. So we are focused on educating people, and then we provide resources that help people to advocate for themselves, because when the deluge happened in 2021 of people, literally thousands of people, tens of thousands of people asking for help, we couldn't help everybody. So we created resources that they could then take and say, this is the law to my school. This is the law to my employer. You can't do this to me. And it helped in one situation, a bunch of families in Bishop, California, they fought the school district that was bullying and discriminating against their children, and they got a $400,000 settlement, and the school is being forced to undergo, I forget what it is, some kind of sensitivity or remediation treatment where they learn what the law is about informed consent. So I want to just give you a little sense of what we learned in our mask case, because it applies to what Greg is talking about and the whole health freedom issue in a bigger context. What we learned was that CDC lied. I know that's really hard for you all to believe. CDC is still lying about the effectiveness and safety of masks. Their own study in May of 2020 found that masks do not stop transmission or infection of influenza-like viruses, respiratory diseases. Neither does distancing or even environmental sanitizing or even like enhanced hand washing. Their own study found this, and yet they published that study in May of 2020, and then they started implementing mask mandates, and then they manufactured a bunch of research mechanistic studies where they shot spittle out of a gun at like a piece of cloth or something, and it stopped it. And so they said, well, this is proof that it stops respiratory disease. That's the research that they used. And I know this because in the mask case, they submitted a document to the court, 300 pages long, absent a single randomized controlled trial proving the effectiveness or safety of masks. They didn't have a single randomized controlled trial in support of their mask mandate that they issued on 330 million Americans. Think about that. And they are still to this day pretending that they have the science, even though more science proves that they were dishonest from the very beginning. They knew all along. They've known since 1918. In fact, the Washington Post of all outlets actually ran an article. Everybody masked in 1918. They were a failure. They published that in I think it was June or July of 2020, that article. We knew, but they went for it anyway. Why? Because you know what? Government has become a law unto itself. And this is the problem that we face. And it is my hope that Idaho will be different, will forge a different path. So armed with this knowledge of how much the CDC can abuse, and FDA as well, FDA authorized those shots despite the fact that there was zero evidence essentially of safety or efficacy. The shots were never studied to determine whether or not they stopped transmission or infection. They were only studied to determine whether or not they stopped the appearance of symptoms. How insane is that? And yet they're recommending those for 6-month-old babies when most countries around the world have rescinded any kind of advocacy for those shots in people under 50. We are dealing with something beyond corrupt, and it's incumbent upon every American to recognize that if we're going to change it. So we learned this. State health departments are an arm of this. Why? The moolah. They get billions of dollars from the CDC every single year in the Vaccines for Children program. They got billions. I think the CDC doled out something like $7 billion in 2009 during the swine flu hoax. And I say it was a hoax because you know why? Because the tests showed that only a few % of people who were deemed highly likely to test positive tested positive. They didn't have it. And yet they still pretended and declared an emergency. But the thing is, the health departments in the states get money for going along with these things. And so they're basically a problem. They're part of the problem. Same thing, of course, we know about how much happened under the CARES Act. It was so very caring, wasn't it? All the money that's been funneled to state health departments and to state governments. What is it? Our budget in Idaho has gone up 40% or something in the last 4 years. I think that's right. This is a problem, and it's exacerbated by the fact that medicine in the United States is corporate medicine. It's not about health, it's about their wealth. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I know this firsthand. When I worked on Wall Street, I used to interview the CEOs of multinational corporations to discern whether or not we should invest in them. We were some of the biggest shareholders in these companies. And I listened to the CEO of one of the largest vaccine manufacturers in the world, a name brand company that you all know, tell me to my face when his product, when rumors were leaking out that his new blockbuster drug that was coming to the market was killing people. He looked at me and all of the other team members at our company and he said, listen, a few people have died. The bad news is the FDA is going to make us put a black box warning on the packaging. The good news is we still think we can do $7 billion in peak sales. It is beyond disgusting. It was one of the most pivotal moments in my life. I was absolutely sickened and went back to my office and paced back and forth, literally so distraught over this. I was just like, they're going to kill people. They're going to kill people. And I marched down the hallway to our pharmaceutical analyst office and flung the door open and looked at her, and I'll just call her Jane. Jane, this is wrong. And she just looked up at me like, yeah, lady, what do you want me to do about it? But at that moment, I knew I was playing for the wrong team. And that was the time when I decided that I was going to leave finance, leave Wall Street, leave all of the, all the trappings of success that I had, and try and make a difference in the world. And that's why I made my movie, The Greater Good, the vaccine documentary, and then started Health Freedom Defense Fund, because I'm in a position, having seen that firsthand, to know how the game is played and what they're up to. And it's not in your interest. Corporate medicine must be stopped. It has a stranglehold on this country. We pay the most for our health care. It's not health care. It is disease management. We pay more than any other country per capita and in absolute terms on the planet, and we have the worst health outcomes. We have I think the least longevity of almost any Western country. We rank last in the Western countries for infant mortality. We have the highest rate of children who are suffering from chronic illnesses and diseases. And this is all connected to the drugs, in particular, the vaccines that are administered to children within the first few hours of life. This is what is happening. We must break this stranglehold on our country if we are to succeed, if we are to survive, and if we are to exhibit health and vibrancy. It has to change. The simple fact of the matter is that 40,000 people are injured by hospital errors in this country every single day. Every day. 440,000 medical errors result in death every year in this country. If you look at all of the different, I'll wrap up, I can see people coming. If you look at all the different ways that the pharmaceutical industry, or excuse me, the different ways that people die after some kind of medical intervention, it ranks as the first, second, or third highest leading cause of death in this country. That's the truth. So what do we do about this, folks? We have to change the law locally. Changing it on the federal level is not going to save us, because they are all owned almost by by the pharmaceutical industry. So first of all, there was H525, which would have prevented or just slightly changed the language so that health districts couldn't do all things, but only what was reasonable and necessary. And that died. We have got to get that passed because no bureaucrat should have the power to do anything to us. We have to have the right to refuse laws. My own father-in-law was not allowed to take the medications that he wanted when he was hospitalized. He ended up dying. They would not allow us. They wouldn't. You can't refuse the protocol that they dictate in the hospitals. We need right to refuse laws, and we also need to repeal all medical mandates in this state. No one gets to tell you what you put in your body or how you keep yourselves well. Finally, we need a bill to protect supplements and also homeopathics. FDA, controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, is out for your nutritional supplements and for your homeopathics, which have been used for over 200 years. They are totally safe. They're non-toxic, non-habit forming. We need bills to protect our access so that FDA can't prevent it. Thank you very much. You can, yes, to support Health Freedom Defense Fund, you can go to healthfreedomdefense.org. You can sign up for our newsletter. That's for free. You can become a member for $10, and you can donate there as well. You can even donate to our specific lawsuits if that's of interest to you. Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We got to get out of here. There's another group coming in. But one announcement for next week, we are likely to be across the street or across the hall in room 55. And if you haven't gotten enough of the health freedom thing, we're going to have Dr. Ryan Cole.